Picture this. In the quiet hills outside Nanjing, China, sunlight slides over ancient scars of stone. The air is still, broken only by the whisper of wind across colossal, half-carved shapes. These are not the remnants of nature, but the unfinished dreams of human hands. Here at the Yangshan Quarry, time itself seems to have stopped in the middle of a single, impossible idea. Centuries ago, during the early 1400s, this place was alive with sound. Hammering, chiseling, shouts echoing through the quarry. It was the reign of the Yongle Emperor, the visionary ruler behind the Forbidden City. And he had ordered the construction of a monument unlike anything seen before. The stones carved here were to form the stele of his mausoleum, a towering pillar meant to proclaim his power for eternity. It was to be the largest stone monument ever built, a declaration to the heavens that even death would not silence his reign. But today, all that remains are three vast blocks, carved, shaped, and abandoned. The largest of them, still fused to the bedrock, weighs an estimated 16,000 tons. That's heavier than a modern warship, heavier than anything humans have ever attempted to move without machines. The second and third blocks lie nearby, smaller only by comparison, each weighing thousands of tons. Their sharp edges and tool marks look fresh even after 6 centuries, as though the workers have just gone for a meal and never returned. Standing before them, you feel something strange. The scale bends your sense of proportion. The quarry walls rise like the ribs of a giant, and in the middle of it, these stones sit as if waiting for a purpose that never came. How many hands shaped them? How many lives were spent under the sun, striking the same rock inch by inch to carve a monument to eternity, only for it to remain unfinished? Historical records tell us this was part of the Ming Xiaoling complex, the grand tomb of the emperor himself. The workers were to carve 3 enormous sections that would be assembled into a single stele, a kind of stone tablet rising more than 70 meters high. But at some point, everything stopped. The chisels fell silent. The quarry was abandoned mid-project, and no one ever returned to complete it. Why? The most accepted theory is painfully simple. The stones were too heavy to move. The Ming engineers might have realized too late that their ambition had outgrown reality. Even with thousands of laborers, logs, sledges, and ropes, transporting a block of 16,000 tons over uneven terrain would have been close to impossible. And even if they could somehow drag it to the mausoleum site, how would they ever raise it upright? No modern crane on Earth could do it safely today. The logistics would have been staggering. Imagine that realization dawning on the builders, that the greatest monument ever envisioned by an emperor could not be completed because no amount of power or manpower could overcome gravity itself. Perhaps the orders were quietly withdrawn. Perhaps the quarry workers were reassigned to other imperial projects, to the walls of Beijing, the palaces of the capital, the great temples that still stand today. And so this place froze in time, a monument to unfinished ambition. But the mystery runs deeper than simple failure. Why did they even begin carving blocks of that size? The quarry shows careful planning, level cuts, precise alignment, suggesting that the builders had a system, a process. Did they believe they possessed a forgotten technique to move these stones? Some ancient method now lost? Or was it faith, the belief that divine will, not mathematics, would carry them through? The longer you stand among those stone blocks, the more you sense that this place was never just a quarry. It feels like a message carved into the earth itself, a reminder that human ambition, no matter how vast, can meet its limit in silence. The stones are unfinished, yes, but they are not failures. They are proof of how far people are willing to go to leave their mark, to reach beyond what the world tells them is possible. If you run your hand across the chiseled surface, you can still feel the rhythm of ancient tools. Each groove is a heartbeat frozen in rock. The men who carved here never saw the monument complete. They likely never saw their emperor again. But their work endures, their effort immortalized not in perfection, but in pause. Today, archaeologists and engineers from around the world visit Yangshan to study the impossible. They measure the angles, estimate the weights, and debate whether moving these stones was ever feasible. Some even suggest that the project was symbolic, meant to demonstrate imperial might rather than produce a finished object. Others wonder if political upheaval or shifts in court priorities halted the work. The Ming dynasty was vast and complex, and power could shift overnight. Perhaps the emperor himself changed his mind, realizing that eternity did not need to be carved from a mountain. Still, the site has an aura that transcends reason. There's something unsettling about it. The perfection of a plan left undone, the precision frozen mid-act. Even after hundreds of years, the surfaces of the stones look raw and deliberate, like open wounds in the earth. Rainwater pools in their corners. Moss grows along the edges. Nature is slowly reclaiming the work of men who tried to defy it. The Yangshan Quarry stands as a paradox, an incomplete monument that tells a complete story. It speaks of vision and failure, pride and humility, all etched into stone. It reminds us that history isn't only written in what was finished, but also in what was abandoned. Some achievements are remembered because they succeeded, others because they reached too far. So when you look at those massive blocks, each heavier than the tallest tower's foundations, you're not just looking at ancient stone. You're looking at a dream caught between imagination and reality. A moment in time when human ambition touched the edge of the impossible and had to stop. And maybe that's the real monument the builders left behind. Not a stele of glory, but a question. A question that still lingers 600 years later, echoing through the quarry's silence. Could we, even today, finish what they started? Or were some dreams never meant to be moved? Beneath the dry plains of central Turkey lies a world no one expected to find. A world carved not from imagination, but from solid rock. It begins with a simple story. A man renovating his home in 1963, knocking down a wall and discovering something impossible behind it. The wall did not open into another room or even a basement. It opened into the earth itself, into a tunnel that led downward, twisting into darkness. And as he followed that tunnel, the air grew cooler, the walls smoother, and the realization heavier with every step. He hadn't found a cave. He had found an entire city buried beneath his feet. That city is now known as Derinkuyu. Hidden under the volcanic landscape of Cappadocia, it stretches nearly 60 meters deep, almost 200 feet, and covers an area large enough to house more than 20,000 people. An entire civilization built in reverse, not toward the sky, but into the ground. Walking through it feels like stepping into another dimension. Narrow passageways snake downward in spirals. Rooms open suddenly into vast halls where ceilings are blackened with ancient smoke. There are kitchens, cellars, stables, schools, and even chapels. The deeper you go, the more it feels like a living organism, a city that breathes through its own veins of stone. The volcanic tuff of Cappadocia made it possible. It's soft enough to carve, yet stable enough to hold its shape once cut. Generations of builders learned how to shape this rock into walls, corridors, and staircases that could endure centuries. Each tunnel is carefully angled, each ceiling curved to bear the pressure above. They dug out the debris, hauled it to the surface by hand, and vanished into the dark again, carving deeper and deeper until they reached the Earth's heart. The engineering of Derinkuyu is breathtaking. 52 ventilation shafts pierce the city, channeling air to every level. Even in the deepest chambers, the air feels cool and fresh. Some of these shafts double as wells, giving access to water that could be reached without ever returning to the surface. The planning had to be precise. One wrong cut or one misaligned tunnel, and the entire structure could collapse. Yet it stands to this day, proof of ancient design so efficient that modern engineers still study it. Life underground was not temporary. It was organized, sustainable, and surprisingly advanced. The upper levels were for animals and storage, while deeper sections held homes, meeting halls, and places of worship. Each passage could be sealed off with enormous round stone doors, carved to roll into place like boulders, locking entire corridors from within. These were not random constructions. They were defenses, barriers against something outside. That is what makes Derinkuyu so haunting. It wasn't built for comfort or vanity. It was built for survival. Across history, this region saw invasions, wars, and religious persecution. From the Hittites to the Persians, from the Greeks to the Byzantines, and later the Arab raids, Cappadocia stood at the crossroads of empires. The people who carved this city were responding to fear, to the need for protection that could last for weeks or months at a time. Down here, entire communities could vanish from the surface and live hidden until danger passed. Food storage rooms, wine presses, and oil cellars suggest they prepared for long stays underground. Waste was carefully managed, airflow maintained, and entrances concealed. And yet, this was not just a bunker. There were chapels, altars, and gathering halls where voices once rose in prayer. The city wasn't lifeless. It had faith, structure, rhythm. Families lived here. Children played in dim corridors lit by oil lamps. Animals rested in carved stalls. Somewhere in the flicker of those lamps, life continued as if the world above had ended. Archaeologists believe Derinkuyu's roots reach back thousands of years, perhaps to the Phrygians around the 8th or 7th century BC, though some evidence hints it could be older, possibly Hittite. Later civilizations expanded it, reshaped it, and used it again and again. By the Byzantine period, Christians fleeing persecution took refuge here, adding churches and crosses carved directly into the rock. Over time, as threats shifted and empires fell, Derinkuyu was sealed off and forgotten, until that moment in 1963, when a single wall came down and the ancient dark exhaled again. It's strange to think that this massive underground network was built without advanced tools or technology. The people who created it understood stone, air, and light better than most modern builders. The ventilation shafts are placed so that even when upper entrances were sealed, the lower levels could still breathe. The temperature stays stable year-round. neither hot in summer nor freezing in winter. A natural climate control system designed by hands that never studied physics, only survival. Derinkuyu is not alone. Cappadocia hides more than 200 other underground cities, some possibly connected by tunnels stretching for kilometers. Imagine that, a vast, unseen network beneath the earth, linking hidden communities like a secret civilization operating parallel to the surface world. Only a fraction of it has been explored. The rest remains sealed behind collapsed walls, waiting for rediscovery. When you stand inside one of those stone corridors, with the ceiling just above your head and the air whispering through unseen shafts, it's hard not to feel the weight of time pressing down. Every mark on the wall, every worn step in the floor, tells a story of people who refused to disappear, who found safety not by building upward, but by digging deeper. There's something poetic in that reversal. Most civilizations express their greatness through height, towers, temples, monuments. But Derinkuyu's people expressed theirs through depth. They turned fear into architecture, turning the earth itself into a fortress. They carved their hope into stone, layer by layer, until it became a labyrinth of endurance. Even now, scientists and historians can't agree on everything. Was Derinkuyu built all at once or expanded over centuries? Were its lowest levels meant for long-term living or sacred use? And what event or chain of events first inspired people to vanish underground? We may never know the full story. The answers are buried, just like the city itself. As you walk out of its tunnels into the sunlight, the contrast is overwhelming. The brightness feels unreal after the steady calm of the dark. You realize that thousands of years ago, people walked that same path, emerging after weeks hidden below, blinking at the return of the world. For them, it wasn't a tourist attraction. It was a rebirth. Derinkuyu is more than an archaeological wonder. It's a portrait of human resilience, proof that our ancestors were not just builders of monuments, but architects of survival. When the world above turned violent, they turned inward. When the sky brought danger, they built a sanctuary beneath it. And somewhere, in the deepest chambers where no light reaches, the silence still feels alive, as if the city remembers. In the Sichuan Basin of southwest China, beneath layers of soil and time, a forgotten civilization once thrived. A people whose art was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Their creations were strange, beautiful, and almost alien. This was Sanxingdui, a Bronze Age culture that vanished without leaving a single written word, but whose artifacts speak louder than any record. The story begins in 1929, when a farmer digging a ditch unearthed a handful of jade pieces. No one knew what they were, and the discovery was soon forgotten. Decades later, in the 1980s, archaeologists returned, and what they found changed everything. Beneath the ground lay two vast pits filled with thousands of bronze, gold, jade, and ivory artifacts, masks, statues, ornaments, objects so refined and so unlike any other Chinese art that experts could barely believe they were real. The bronze masks are what first catch your breath. Some are enormous, over a meter wide, their eyes stretched outward in long tubes or raised ridges, their faces frozen in an expression both powerful and inhuman. Others are covered in gold foil, their surfaces gleaming as if meant to shine in torchlight. The precision is remarkable. Delicate curves, symmetrical lines, features that seem carved from imagination rather than memory. Nearby stood towering bronze figures, some more than 2 meters tall, with hands poised as though once holding sacred objects now lost to time. A massive bronze tree, nearly 4 meters high, rises in curling branches, decorated with birds, leaves, and serpents. No other Bronze Age civilization in the world produced art like this. The craftsmanship was sophisticated, but the imagery was something else entirely. Symbolic, surreal, almost cosmic. For decades, archaeologists struggled to place Sanxingdui within known Chinese history. The style of its bronzes was nothing like that of the Shang dynasty, which ruled central China at the same time. The Shang favored symmetry and compact motifs. Sanxingdui was bold and abstract, faces that seemed to watch the world beyond their own. This wasn't just another regional variant of Chinese art. It was a parallel civilization, the Kingdom of Shu, with its own gods, rituals, and language, cut off by mountains and rivers from the rest of the world. No written records from Shu survive. Everything we know comes from what the earth preserved. The artifacts hint at a deeply spiritual people, one that worshipped through vision and transformation. Many of the masks share the same strange eyes, wide and projecting. Some scholars believe this symbolized seeing beyond the physical world, or the divine ability to perceive hidden realms. Others think they were depictions of gods or ancestors, beings not meant to look human at all. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why were thousands of valuable objects buried deliberately? The pits were not random trash heaps. They were ritual deposits. The bronzes were broken and burned before burial, as if part of a great ceremonial act. Were they offerings to deities, symbols marking the end of an era? Or was the entire city performing a ritual farewell, sealing its identity forever beneath the soil? The mystery deepens when you realize Sanxingdui simply disappeared. Around 3,000 years ago, the site was abandoned. No sign of war, no sudden destruction, just silence. Nearby, another city, Jinsha, emerged centuries later, showing similar art and artifacts. Some archaeologists think the Shu people may have migrated there after a natural disaster, perhaps a massive earthquake that changed the course of the river and cut off their water supply. Others believe they simply moved their spiritual center, leaving Sanxingdui as a sacred memory. What's certain is that their craftsmanship was ahead of its time. Their bronze casting methods were advanced, their designs deliberate and deeply symbolic. They worked with gold, jade, ivory, and shells from distant coasts, proof of trade networks stretching across Asia. The materials tell of wealth and complexity. The art tells of imagination and power. Even today, standing among the recovered artifacts, it's hard to shake the feeling that these objects don't quite belong to our world. The faces are too strange, the proportions too deliberate. They seem made to communicate with something beyond us, not just to be seen, but to be understood by a different kind of gaze. That eerie familiarity and distance make Sanxingdui one of archaeology's greatest enigmas. For China, it redefined history. Until its discovery, scholars believed the Shang dynasty was the cradle of early Chinese civilization. Sanxingdui proved otherwise, showing that advanced urban societies existed far beyond the Yellow River Valley, developing independently with their own traditions and technologies. It reminded the world that human progress isn't linear or centralized. Greatness can rise in isolation and vanish without a trace. What remains of Sanxingdui today are artifacts of stunning imagination. A civilization that mastered metal and mystery, yet left behind no story but the one we try to piece together. Were these gods they worshipped masks for rituals, portraits of rulers or myths? We may never know, but their message endures in bronze and gold, a whisper from a lost people who dared to see the world differently. As you stand before the giant bronze faces, their eyes seem to follow you, calm, distant, knowing. They look like witnesses, not of time, but of something eternal. And maybe that's what they were meant to be, guardians of a forgotten vision. A vision carved into metal so that even when their city fell silent, their gods would keep watching. Across the deserts of Jordan and Syria, where the earth stretches in endless tones of rust and gold, lie circles so vast that you can't truly see them standing on the ground. Only from above, from the vantage point of a bird or a passing aircraft, do they reveal themselves. Perfect rings of stone, enormous in scale, precise in geometry, drawn onto the desert floor thousands of years ago by hands we still cannot identify. They are known simply as the Big Circles. Each one is nearly 400 meters across, larger than 4 football fields laid end to end, and yet their walls rise barely a meter high. From the ground, they look like nothing more than low stone ridges scattered in the dust. But from the air, their perfection is unmistakable. The lines are clean, symmetrical, deliberate. Whoever built them was measuring not by instinct, but by design. The circles first came to modern attention a century ago. In the 1920s, British pilots flying reconnaissance missions over the Middle East began noticing strange patterns below, shapes too large to grasp without altitude. They photographed them, puzzled but with no means to investigate. For decades, the circles remained little more than notes on old aerial maps, fading into the margins of history. It wasn't until satellite imagery became widely available that archaeologists rediscovered them in detail. Digital surveys revealed that the big circles weren't random at all. They were spread across the basalt plains of Jordan and into Syria, with remarkable consistency in size and shape. Nearly all were near-perfect circles, not ovals or rough enclosures, and most lacked any kind of entrance. That precision is one of the great puzzles. To draw and build a circle hundreds of meters wide, even today, would require careful measurement, surveying tools, and coordination. To do so thousands of years ago, using only simple instruments, suggests a level of planning and understanding that challenges what we assume about ancient builders in this region. Their age remains uncertain. No tools, pottery, or artifacts have been found inside the circles that could provide clear dating. Some researchers think they may be at least 2,000 years old. Others argue they could date back to the Neolithic period, more than 5,000 years ago. Without organic material to test, time here feels weightless. The stones could have been laid before writing existed, before cities rose from mud and clay. So, what were they for? That's the question that haunts every photograph and excavation. The circles are too low to serve as defensive walls, too broad and open to be animal pens. They show no evidence of habitation, no hearths, no tools, no burials. They simply exist, enormous and empty. One theory suggests they were boundary markers, vast territorial symbols visible from afar, declaring ownership or sacred space to those who cross the desert. Another proposes that they were ceremonial, built for processions or rituals that gathered people seasonally. A third idea, perhaps the most haunting, is that they were never meant to be seen from the ground at all. Like the Nazca lines in Peru, they might have been messages or offerings directed skyward, meant for gods, spirits, or something beyond human sight. There's poetry in that possibility. Imagine ancient people arranging stones under the desert sun, walking in measured steps, guided by some cosmic design, creating shapes they could never fully perceive themselves. To them, it might have been an act of faith, a geometry performed for the heavens. Still, their uniformity across vast distances raises another question. The big circles of Jordan and Syria are nearly identical in proportion, as if built to a shared standard. Were these connected cultures exchanging ideas across the desert? Or did multiple groups, separated by time, repeat the same design for reasons now forgotten? Some archaeologists note that the circles appear near other ancient features, cairns, tombs, and desert kites used for hunting, but they don't align or interact with them directly. The circles seem independent, isolated acts of construction. That isolation only deepens the mystery. On the ground, walking along their low stone edges, you can feel the immensity but not the shape. The curve is too wide to follow with your eyes. The horizon swallows it. Only from a drone, a plane, or satellite can the full perfection be seen. Perhaps that's the most surreal part. A prehistoric design that only truly exists when viewed from above, as if it were meant to be witnessed by something looking down. Over time, erosion and shifting sands have worn many of the stones away, but the patterns persist. They refuse to vanish, their geometry resisting nature's chaos. Every line still marks a deliberate choice made thousands of years ago by people whose names and languages have long disappeared. Technology has allowed us to map them more precisely than ever. Archaeologists can now trace the radius, the symmetry, the subtle variations from one circle to the next, and yet, the more precisely we measure them, the less certain we become of their meaning. Precision only highlights purpose, and here the purpose remains blank. Were they calendars, star maps, ceremonial spaces? The truth may be simpler or stranger. Perhaps they were acts of creation, an early expression of the human need to impose order on the endless desert. The desire to draw meaning into the earth itself. When you look at the big circles from above, they seem both human and inhuman, deliberate yet detached from practicality. They whisper of a civilization that understood the power of form, of emptiness, of symbols too large to comprehend from the ground. In a landscape of dust and silence, they remain perfect. Circles drawn against time, their stones slowly crumbling but their pattern enduring. We can map them, photograph them, measure every curve. But until we understand why they were made, the big circles will remain what they have always been. Questions written in stone, visible only to those who know how to look from the sky.